Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my quick review of the new Viltrox 35mm F1.8 STM lens. This is the third of a series of 3 lenses that they have released together over the last year, 24mm F1.8 along with the 50mm F1.8, and now this 35mm that slots between those two and is the last to come to market. I reviewed each of these in their time, and all of them fall essentially in what I would call the average category. And this is particularly true when it comes to this lens, where there are a number of 35mm options, even at the f1.8 or f2 aperture value here on the Sony platform where I'm reviewing. Though I will note, this lens is also being released on Nikon Z or Z, and hopefully in the future on Canon RF. It becomes a little bit more interesting on those platforms due to having so few options relative to the Sony. Now, I'll give you a few more details here as we take a look at different aspects of its performance, but if you want the deep dive, I recommend that you check out the definitive review instead. But we'll jump right into it and give you some quick highlights right after a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Phantom Wallet, the minimalist, modern wallet that sets you free from a bulky traditional wallet while also making it easy to access your cards and money when you need them, thanks to their unique fanning mechanism. Visit phantomwallet.com to check out their unique sizes, styles, and finishes that span from aluminum to wood to carbon fiber. You can even customize your wallet with new accessories like a money clip, cash holder, ID display, and even the Chipolo tracking integration if you're the kind of person who loses their wallet. Use code DUSTIN15 for 15% off when you're ready to check out. For those of us who review Viltrox lenses, the new 35mm f1.8 STM looks very familiar. It is nearly identical in size and shape to the 24mm and 50mm f1.8 lenses from Viltrox that I've previously reviewed. That's not a bad thing though, as this is a relatively compact lens with a very nice build quality. The lens is 70mm in diameter and sports a 55mm front filter thread, meaning filters can be shared across all 3 lenses. It is 88.2mm in length and weighs 340 grams. It feels substantial due to the all metal and glass construction, save the lens hood, which is plastic. There is a declicked aperture ring that allows you to select aperture manually, but has the alternative to put it in automatic mode and to control aperture from within the camera. There are 9 aperture blades in the iris, which allows for a fairly circular shape when stopped down. Minimum focus distance is rarely a Viltrox strength, and that's true here, as you can only focus as closely as 40 centimeters, which results in a fairly low 0.10 times magnification. There is no weather sealing, but the lens does sport a USB-C port in the lens mount to allow for easy firmware updates. All told, this is a very nicely built lens for a price point of right under $400 US. For this segment, I'm actually filming with the Viltrox 35mm f1.8 at f1.8, so you can get a sense of how it does in tracking my face for this kind of still talking head type portion. Viltrox has equipped this lens with a lead screw type STM motor, and for the most part, autofocus, I have almost all positive things to say, with just one negative. Let's get the negative out of the way, and the negative comes when I'm doing focus pulls. While the focus pulls themselves are confident and they're smooth, what you can hear is some clicking and whirring that's picked up by the microphone when recording in a silent type situation. Now, you will get a little bit of that in ordinary shooting. However, you're really not probably going to pick up on it very much. In normal situations, if you're paying attention, you might hear some faint whirring and clicking, but for the most part, autofocus seems pretty quiet. I also found that I got good results if I was trying to track my face, putting my hand up in front of it and making the camera or in the lens kind of focus and refocus. You can see that it snaps back to the eye very quickly without any kind of hunting or pulsing. Likewise, I got really good results in a near dark room, shooting at ISO 12,800. Loki had kind of climbed up under a blanket, and so all that was illuminating the room was a screen across the room, and so it was very dim conditions. But no matter kind of how I positioned the camera, IAF just locked right onto his eye and delivered accurately focused result after accurately focused result. Interestingly, I was actually testing the new Fujifilm GFX 50S Mark II medium format camera, and had a pretty high-end lens on there, the 110mm f2. And despite, having very expensive gear compared to relatively inexpensive gear, at least as far as the lens goes here, in that same kind of environment, I was just unable to lock focus at all with the Fuji combination. Now, medium format autofocus is not at the same level as a full frame mirrorless autofocus, and so it's not really an apples to apples comparison, but you have to confess it made the Viltrox look pretty good when you're comparing it to a lens that costs something like 7 or 8 times as much. And so I think that as far as focus accuracy, I saw really good results, and I think that Viltrox is doing a really good job in nailing that aspect of things. And so the only time that I had any kind of autofocus really hesitancy is always I did feel that there was a few situations when stopped down to landscape apertures where I didn't necessarily get locked on the right kind of thing, and I had to either take a second shot or I needed to put the autofocus point where I actually wanted it to be. But that only happened once or twice, and so for the most part I ended up with just really well focused results. So I think that autofocus is something that Viltrox is doing a good job with overall. So how about the image quality from the lens? As I noted in the introduction, it is what I would call average, in that you have a mild amount of pincushion distortion, about a -3 to correct, but a heavier amount of vignette, which required about a +60 to correct for, so about 2.5 stops by my estimation in the corners. Fortunately, there is a correction profile already in Adobe software, though unfortunately there is not in camera. And so that's one thing that might be a factor for you, at least on Sony. Beyond that, however, there is a mild amount of longitudinal chromatic aberrations. You'll probably primarily see it as some green fringing on bokeh highlights or out of focus highlights. You'll also see, fortunately, almost no lateral chromatic aberration up on the edges of the frame. And so I would say that for a Viltrox lens, it's actually a little bit better than usual performance. What I also noted is that center sharpness at f1.8 is fairly good, though contrast is not off the charts. And as you stop on down to f2, a little bit of improvement and excellent center sharpness by f2.8. In the mid frame, it trails behind the center by a little bit, but by the time you hit f2.8, it's starting to look good, looking great by f4. Down in the corners, however, even at around f5.6, they never quite sharpen up to the level of what we saw in the center of the frame, though they become acceptably sharp. What I did note in some real-world use is that I found that the corners had a little bit of a nervous quality to them, in that there's a resolution there, but it's like everything didn't quite line up perfectly. And so it's not necessarily as sharp at smaller apertures as a lens, say like the Samyang 35mm F1.8, or for that matter, the Sigma or Sony options as well. Where it is a little bit above average, though, I think, is when it comes to the quality of the bokeh. The bokeh is nice and smooth, and this lens does not have a very good magnification level, only at 0.10 times, which means its potential for blurring out a background by getting up close to something is not particularly high. But where it does excel is that where you do get bokeh, I thought the quality of the out of focus area was definitely better than average. Also better than average is its flare resistant, which was really high, basically no ghosting, no veiling. It looked really good in those kind of settings. Chroma performance was only so-so, in that there wasn't terrible chromatic distortion in the corners of the frame. However, there is a fair amount of fringing that shows up in that kind of setting, which definitely is going to detract from its value as an astrophotography lens, not a top pick in my estimation. All of this for a price point of, as I said, right around $400 US. The thing is that a few years ago, this lens would have been above average, but there's been a lot of great options that have dropped at the 35mm focal length since that point. And so as a byproduct, I wonder if it's going to have enough going for it to make a splash. At the end of the day, it's not a bad choice, but maybe it's not the best choice. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you look in the description down below, you can find links to the full text review. If you prefer written reviews, there's also an image gallery. If you want to check out photos and make some determinations for yourself, some buying links if you'd like to purchase one. Beyond that, you can check out our new channel, or you can follow myself or Craig on social media, become a patron, purchase channel merchandise, and of course, if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and let the light in.